African billionaire returns home and is shocked to find his new African nanny, an only son, in the living room. He had built an empire from the dusty streets of Lagos to the glittering skylines of Dubai. A man whose name opened doors in the world of finance, luxury, and influence. For 12 years, he had been untouchable until his marriage ended in a scandal that left him fighting for custody of his only son. Determined to protect the boy from the chaos of public life, he hired a new African nanny, handpicked through rigorous background checks. But the day he returned home unexpectedly, walking into his own penthouse's living room, he froze. There they were, his little boy, laughing freely, and the nanny sitting beside him, holding something in her hands that made his blood run cold. In that moment, he realized this was no ordinary hire, and what she had just told his son could change everything he thought he knew about his own family. Before we begin, make sure to subscribe to the channel, like this video, and turn on notifications. This helps us bring you more inspiring and dramatic stories just like this one. The elevator doors slid open to the quiet luxury of the Adeyemi penthouse. From the 27th floor, Lagos stretched out in every direction, the Atlantic shimmering gold under the setting sun. The glass walls framed the city like a living painting, but Kwame Adeyemi's focus wasn't on the view. He was home earlier than expected, his flight from Johannesburg canceled by a sudden storm, and something about stepping into the silence felt different. Kwame, 42, African billionaire and CEO of Adeyemi Global Holdings, was a man who rarely surprised himself. Every move in his life was calculated, meetings scheduled months ahead, public appearances crafted for maximum effect, even his moments of leisure carefully planned. But walking into his own home unannounced was a rare, almost reckless decision. After his divorce, the penthouse had become more fortress than home. Winning sole custody of his only son, Malik, had been his most hard-fought victory, and he guarded it fiercely. Malik had been only 6 when the legal war ended. A quiet boy, too used to whispered arguments behind closed doors. Since then, Kwame had built walls around him, both emotional and physical. That was why the choice of a nanny had been so critical. 3 had already come and gone in the last year. Then came Amara, a young African woman with impeccable references, a spotless background check, and, most importantly, a way of making Malik laugh. Kwame remembered the first day he saw them together. Malik's smile, genuine and unforced, had been enough to silence his doubts. He crossed the marble floor toward the living room now, his footsteps barely a whisper. Somewhere ahead, the sound reached him, Malik's laughter. It was rare enough to make Kwame pause. Not the polite giggle his son sometimes gave guess, but a deep belly laugh that belonged to a boy who had forgotten the world could be cruel. Curious, he stepped into the living room. Floor-to-ceiling windows bathed the space in gold. Malik sat cross-legged on the plush rug, crayons scattered around him. Across from him, Amara knelt on the floor, holding something wrapped in worn fabric. Her posture was relaxed, her focus entirely on the boy. It was the object in her hands that caught Kwame's attention. She unfolded the fabric to reveal a photograph, old, edges frayed, colors faded with time. Malik leaned in, tracing it with his small fingers. "Daddy." Malik's face lit up when he saw him. "Look, is this you?" Kwame's breath caught. It was him, in Ghana, maybe 7 years old, barefoot in front of his grandmother's house. In the background stood his mother, smiling in a way he hadn't seen since before the years of struggle. He hadn't laid eyes on this photo in over 3 decades. He stepped forward slowly. "Where did you get that?" Amara looked up at him, calm but watchful. "It belonged to my family. My grandmother kept it." Kwame frowned. "Your grandmother? Why would she have a picture of me?" Malik glanced between them, sensing the change in the air. "Daddy, is she family?" Kwame didn't answer. His mind was already racing. His mother had been private to the point of secrecy, especially about her past. The idea that someone else's family had a photo of him from childhood made no sense. Amara broke the silence. "Perhaps we should talk privately." Kwame's gaze stayed fixed on the photograph. His first instinct was to demand an explanation here and now, but he caught Malik's uncertain expression. "Malik," he said gently, "why don't you go finish your drawing in your room?" The boy hesitated, then nodded and left, though not without a backward glance. When they were alone, Kwame turned to Amara, his voice lower, sharper. "Tell me exactly what's going on." She didn't flinch. "I know who you are, Mr. Adeyemi. Not the man on magazine covers. The boy in that photograph. My grandmother knew your mother." Kwame's brows furrowed. "That's not possible. My mother—" "Wouldn't have told you," Amara interrupted softly. "There are things you wanted to keep from you, things that might change how you see her and yourself." Kwame felt a flicker of irritation at her certainty. "And you thought the best way to reveal this was to show my son first?" Her composure wavered for a moment. "It wasn't planned. He asked about my family, and when he saw the photo in my bag, he recognized you. I couldn't lie to him." "You carry it with you? Why?" Amara reached into her pocket, bringing out the photograph again, this time holding it with both hands. "Because it's proof. Proof that our families were connected long before you and I met." Kwame stared at her, the weight of her words pressing in. Proof. Connected. The temptation to dismiss it all as a fabricated story was strong, but something in her tone made it hard to ignore. "What are you saying?" he asked finally. Her eyes met his without hesitation. "I'm saying your mother once saved my grandmother's life. And the reason I'm here is because of a promise she made that day." The room felt suddenly smaller, the air heavier. Down the hall, Malik hummed softly to himself, unaware of the shift in his father's world. Kwame's jaw tightened. "You're going to tell me everything. And you're going to start now." Amara shook her head slightly. "Not here. Not with your son listening. Some truths aren't meant to be told in passing. They change everything once they're spoken." Kwame, a man used to control, hated the feeling of being forced to wait. But as he looked at her, this woman who seemed too poised to be just a nanny, he realized that whatever she had to say was tied to a part of his life he had never questioned. And the answers, when they came, might shatter far more than his carefully built life. Kwame did not like being told to wait. In his world, time was currency, and he spent neither freely nor without control. But something about Amara's unshaken tone had disarmed his instinct to press harder. She had stood in his own home and dictated the terms of their conversation, and instead of firing her on the spot, he found himself curious. They agreed to meet later that evening, after Malik was asleep. Until then, Kwame busied himself with work in his study, though every email he read, every document he signed, felt like a distraction he could not absorb. The photograph and the woman who carried it hovered in his mind. At precisely 9 o'clock, the soft sound of a door closing down the hall signaled that Malik had been tucked into bed. A moment later, there was a knock on the study door. "Come in," Kwame called. Amara stepped inside. She was dressed more simply now, in a pale blouse and loose trousers, her hair tied back. The nanny persona seemed stripped away. She carried herself with a quiet dignity that made her seem older than her years. In her hands was a small leather pouch. Kwame gestured to the armchair opposite his desk. "Sit and start talking." She sat, placing the pouch on her lap. "My grandmother's name was Ngozi. She lived in the same village in Ghana where you spent part of your childhood." Kwame leaned back in his chair, arms crossed. "I've been told many stories about that village. None of them involve your grandmother." Amara nodded. "That's because your mother never spoke of it. What happened between them, it wasn't something people shared lightly." She untied the pouch and pulled out a folded letter, its paper yellowed and fragile. "This was written by your mother. It's dated 34 years ago." Kwame's eyes narrowed. "How did you get that?" "My grandmother kept it. She said your mother gave it to her after saving her life." Amara paused, as if bracing herself, then continued. "It was a dry season, and the river had shrunk to a trickle. Water was scarce, and fights broke out often. One day, a group of men from a neighboring village came armed, accusing ours of stealing from their well. It turned violent. My grandmother was caught in the chaos. Your mother, just a young woman then, stepped between her and a man with a machete. She took the blow to her own arm." Kwame blinked, trying to reconcile this story with the mother he knew, proud, fiercely private, and not prone to tales of heroism. "And this is supposed to be the reason you're here? Because of something that happened decades ago." Amara's voice didn't waver. "It's more than that. After she was treated for her injury, your mother told my grandmother that one day she might not be able to protect her own child. She asked my grandmother to promise that if that day came, she would step in. Family is not only blood, she said. It's those who keep you safe when you can't keep yourself safe. Kwame let out a short, disbelieving laugh. You expect me to believe my mother planned for you to appear in my life 30 years later? That this, he gestured vaguely toward her, is fate. Amara's gaze held his. I expect you to believe she was a woman who understood life could be unpredictable. She didn't know when or how, but she trusted my grandmother to honor her word. When my grandmother passed, she told my mother. And when I learned you were looking for a nanny, I knew it was my turn to keep that promise. Kwame stood and walked to a window. The city below glittered, alive with traffic and neon, but it felt far away, muted. And what exactly do you think you're protecting us from? Amara hesitated. From the same thing that nearly destroyed her, greed, envy, and the kind of enemies money attracts. Kwame turned sharply. You don't know my enemies. No, Amara said evenly, but I've seen men like them. I've seen what they do to children who have no one watching over them closely enough. I'm not here to replace you as a protector, Mr. Adeyemi. I'm here to make sure you're not blindsided. For a moment, the room was silent except for the faint hum of the air conditioning. Kwame's instinct screamed at him to dismiss her story as manipulation. Yet the details, the name of his childhood village, the injury to his mother's arm she had carried as a faint scar, were things few could know. What about that photograph? He asked finally. Amara glanced at the pouch. It was taken the week after she saved my grandmother. My grandfather was a woodworker. He made the toy car you're holding in the picture. Your mother insisted on sending a copy of the photo to my grandmother before she left the village. Kwame turned away, jaw tightening. A part of him wanted to send her away that very night. But another part, deep, uncomfortably human, felt the weight of his mother's voice in those words. Family is not only blood. You're asking me to trust you, he said. But trust has to be earned. I know, Amar replied, and I'm not asking for it all at once. Just enough to let me do what I came here to do. Kwame studied her for a long moment. And if I told you to leave? She met his gaze steadily. Then I'd leave, but I'd find another way to keep the promise, even if you never knew I was there. Something in her tone, quiet, unwavering, made him believe her. He hated that. Finally, he returned to his chair. You'll stay, but from this moment, you answer to me. If you so much as breathe something to my son without my approval, you're gone. Understood? Understood, she said. Kwame nodded, though the knot in his chest remained. Good. Now tell me, who else knows about this promise? Amara hesitated. Only my mother, and possibly the people your mother was protecting you from. The air between them thickened. And why? Kwame asked slowly, do I have a feeling you're not telling me everything? Amara lowered her gaze, her fingers brushing the edge of the old letter. Because some truths, Mr. Adeyemi, can't be spoken until you're ready to hear them. Kwame leaned forward, his voice low. Then I suggest you make me ready. Quickly, she gave the faintest nod, but her eyes carried something he recognized all too well. Knowledge that could destroy or save him, depending on when it was revealed. In that moment, Kwame realized two things. He could not yet decide whether Amara was a blessing or a threat, and whatever her truth was, it had already taken root in his home. The next morning began like any other, at least on the surface. The smell of freshly brewed coffee drifted through the penthouse, mingling with the faint salt of the Atlantic air. Downstairs, Malik's laughter floated from the dining room, where Amara was helping him with breakfast. But to Kwame, everything felt altered. He stood at the window of his bedroom, phone in hand, replaying the previous night's conversation in his head. A 30-year-old promise. A photograph that shouldn't exist in someone else's possession. And a nanny who spoke as though she knew more about his life than he did. Kwame was a man who lived on facts, numbers, contracts, market trends. He didn't like loose ends, and Amara's story was a frayed thread pulling at the edges of his carefully controlled life. At 9 a.m., he took his usual seat at the breakfast table, dressed in a charcoal suit for the morning's board meeting. Malik greeted him with a grin, a smear of jam on his cheek. Daddy, Amara says she can come to my soccer game on Saturday. Kwame glanced at her across the table. She smiled politely, but there was something in her eyes, watchful, almost assessing. He didn't answer Malik directly, just nodded. By 9:30, his driver was waiting downstairs. The building's private lobby gleamed under recessed lighting, polished marble floors reflecting the sunlight streaming in from the street. Kwame was halfway to the black Bentley when the security chief, Tund, stepped forward with a discreet hand signal. "Sir, a moment," Tund said in a low voice. Kwame stopped, irritation flickering. "What is it?" Tund leaned closer. "We had an incident last night. A man tried to get past the front desk around midnight. He claimed he had an appointment with you." Kwame's jaw tightened. "Name?" He didn't give one. "No ID. Said it was a matter of family business." When we refused him entry, he became agitated. Security escorted him out, but not before he left this. Tund handed him a small envelope, plain white, no markings. Kwame slid a finger under the flap. Inside was a single piece of paper, folded twice. On it, in block letters, were 5 words. "She is not who she says." His stomach tightened. "Did you see where he went?" Tund shook his head. Street cameras lost him within 2 blocks. Kwame slipped the note into his jacket pocket, masking any reaction. "Increase security around Malik. No one comes without my clearance." The rest of the day was a blur of meetings and numbers, but his mind kept circling back to the note. Who was the man? And who was the she? The obvious answer was Amara, but the message was too vague, too conveniently timed. By the time he returned home that evening, the sun had dipped below the horizon, casting the city in soft shadows. The penthouse lights glowed warm against the darkening sky. Malik was on the sofa, reading a picture book, while Amara sat nearby, mending a loose button on his shirt. Kwame hung his jacket and crossed the room. "Malik, go get ready for bed," he said gently. The boy hesitated, looking at both of them, then left without protest. Amara looked up. "Is something wrong?" Kwame studied her face. "A man came to the building last night. Said he had family business with me. Left a message." Her hand stilled on the needle and thread. "What did it say?" "That you're not who you say you are." For the first time since they'd met, Amara's composure cracked. "And you believe him?" "I believe in knowing the truth," Kwame said evenly. "So, tell me, what aren't you telling me?" She set the shirt down, folding it carefully. "There are things I plan to share with you, but not yet. Not until I was sure you'd listen, without throwing me out." "Try me," Kwame said, his voice low. She exhaled slowly. "The promise my grandmother made wasn't just about protection. It was about a debt. Your mother didn't just save her life. She kept a secret for her, a secret that, if revealed, could have destroyed both their families." Kwame frowned. "What kind of secret?" "The kind that creates enemies who don't forget," Amara said. "The man who came here last night. I suspect he's connected to them. They've been looking for you for years. Or rather, for something your mother took from them." Kwame stared at her. "And you think bringing this to my home was wise?" "I think not bringing it would have been worse," she replied, meeting his gaze. "You've been targeted before, haven't you? Accidents that didn't feel like accidents. Business deals that turned hostile without warning." Kwame's mind flicked through the last decade, incidents he'd chalked up to corporate rivalry, jealous competitors. Could there have been something more? Before he could answer, Tund appeared in the doorway, his voice urgent. "Sir, you need to see this." Kwame followed him to the security room. On the monitors, a grainy black and white feed showed the lobby from just 20 minutes earlier. A man in a dark hoodie lingered near the reception desk before turning to face the camera briefly. His face was partially obscured, but Kwame felt a jolt of recognition. It was the same man from last night's description, and he wasn't alone this time. Another figure stood just outside the camera's range, waiting. What did they want? Kwame asked. Didn't speak to anyone. Just watched, Tund said. Kwame's thoughts turned sharp and cold. He had spent his life controlling risk, insulating his son from the chaos that wealth attracted. But now, a stranger with a warning, a nanny with half-told truths, and shadowed figures at his door had pulled that control out from under him. He turned to Tund, doubled the guards, and moved Malik's room to the interior suite. No balcony access. When Kwame returned to the living room, Amara was standing by the window, her face unreadable. "They're here for the same reason I am," she said quietly, "and that reason is to finish what they started all those years ago." Kwame's gaze hardened. "Then you better start telling me everything, Amara, because if you don't, those shadows at my gate might get inside before I know who I'm really fighting." The wind outside the penthouse rattled faintly against the glass, but inside, the air was still and heavy. Kwame stood near the window, hands in his pockets, his gaze fixed on Amara. Her face was calm, but her posture was tense, shoulders drawn slightly inward, as though bracing herself for a blow she couldn't avoid. He had given her every chance to speak. Now he was done waiting. "Enough games," he said. "You've been in my home long enough to know I don't tolerate half-truths. You're going to tell me exactly what you know, and you're going to start now." Amara stepped away from the window, her bare feet silent on the polished floor. "The man who came here last night, and again today, isn't just some random intruder. His name is Samuel Adeyemi." Kwame froze. "Adeyemi? That's my family name." "I know," Amara said softly. "He claims to be your uncle." Kwame's jaw tightened. "Impossible. My father had no brothers." "That's what you were told," she replied. "But the truth is your father did have a brother, and he was the reason your parents left Ghana and never looked back." Kwame stared at her, the words sliding into him like cold steel. "Go on." She glanced toward the hallway, as if to make sure Malik wasn't listening, then lower her voice. 34 years ago, your father's brother, Samuel, was deeply involved in a smuggling operation. Not drugs, not weapons, something far more valuable. Gold. Hundreds of kilos moved through secret channels, hidden from both the government and the very partners who financed it. Your mother discovered it by accident when she went back to the village to visit her family. Kwame's mind conjured his mother's face, stern, careful, yet always guarded about her past. Why would she get involved? Because Samuel didn't just smuggle gold, Amara said. He was hiding it in shipments of food aid meant for famine relief. Your mother found out, and she knew it would destroy your father's reputation, and yours, if it ever came to light. So she took the evidence. Every ledger, every photograph, every witness statement she could find. And she disappeared from that village with you. Kwame felt the air grow thinner. And the promise? Amara's eyes met his. My grandmother was there when it happened. She saw your mother confront Samuel. He attacked her, and she fought him off. That's when she was injured, the scar on her arm. My grandmother pulled her away before he could finish what he started. Your mother told her she couldn't go to the authorities. Samuel had connections that reached into the government. So she made my grandmother promise. If she ever couldn't protect you herself, my grandmother would send someone she trusted to do it in her place. Kwame's voice was low, dangerous. "And you're telling me Samuel has been looking for me all these years?" Amara nodded. "Not just you. He's looking for what your mother took from him. Those ledgers, that evidence, it's worth more than the gold itself. And he believes you know where it is." Kwame exhaled slowly, his mind spinning through every unexplained incident over the years. Anonymous threats, hostile takeovers that came out of nowhere, a suspicious fire in one of his warehouses. Things he had always written off as the cost of doing business. But if Samuel had been pulling strings in the shadows, it changed everything. He turned back toward her. "And you? What do you get out of this?" Amara didn't flinch. "I get to honor my grandmother's word. That's all I've ever wanted." "You expect me to believe there's no other motive? That you didn't come here for a payday?" Her eyes hardened. "If I wanted money, I could have sold the photograph to someone in your world and walked away rich. But I didn't. I came here to make sure you and your son stay alive." The last words hit him harder than he expected. Stay alive. It was a phrase people in his inner circle used casually. He studied her for a long moment, searching for any crack in her composure. But she didn't look away. Finally, he spoke. "If Samuel is here, it means he's desperate, which means he's close to losing whatever advantage he's had all these years." Amara nodded slowly. "But desperation makes people dangerous. You built your empire in the open, Mr. Adeyemi. He's built his in the shadows. And men like that, they don't fight fair." Kwame felt familiar tension settle in his chest. Not fear exactly, but the sharp awareness of an enemy moving in. If he thinks I have what he's looking for, he'll make a move soon. Amara's voice dropped even lower. That's why I'm here. Not just to watch over Malik, but to be the one between him and the people who will try to use him to get to you. The thought of Malik in Samuel's hands was enough to make Kwame's blood run cold. He turned and walked to the bar, pouring himself a glass of water more out of the need for a pause and thirst. You've told me more in the last 10 minutes than I've heard about my family in 20 years. But I need proof, Amara. Something I can use. She reached into her bag and pulled out a small flash drive. This is a copy of one of the ledgers your mother took. I've kept it hidden for years. My grandmother gave it to me when she knew her time was short. It's not enough to take him down, but it's enough to make him think twice. Kwame took it. The weight of the tiny object disproportionate to the danger it represented. Why give this to me now? He asked. Because he's already too close, she said. If something happens to me, you need to know exactly what you're up against. A soft knock at the door interrupted them. Tun's voice came through, low and urgent. Sir, we've just had an anonymous delivery for you. No sender listed. It's the box. Small. I think you should see it. Kwame and Amara exchanged a look before he opened the door. Tun handed over a plain black box. No markings. Kwame set it on the table and flipped the latch. Inside was a single object, an old, worn wooden toy car, identical to the one in the photograph. He looked at Amara, whose face had gone pale. That was my grandfather's work, she whispered. The one you were holding in the picture. It'd been missing for decades. Kwame turned the toy over in his hand. Carved into the underside were 5 words, burned into the wood. Time's almost up, nephew. The room went still. Kwame set the car down carefully, his voice calm but edged with steel. Tell Tun to lock down the building. No one in or out without my order. And Amara... She met his gaze, steady despite the fear in her eyes. From this moment on, you don't leave Malik's side. Not for a second. For the first time since they'd met, she nodded without hesitation. Understood. Kwame looked down at the toy again, the weight of the past pressing hard against the present. Samuel wasn't just close. He was already here, and the real game was about to begin. The storm outside had moved in fast, dark clouds swallowing the Lego skyline. Rain lashed against the penthouse glass. The city lights blurred through the downpour. Inside, the air was thick with tension. Kwame stood in the center of the living room, his phone pressed to his ear, speaking in clipped, controlled sentences to the head of his private security. Every exit is covered. No one comes up without my permission. Understood. He hung up and turned to Amara, who stood near Malik's bedroom door like a sentry. Is he asleep? Kwame asked. She nodded. I read to him until he drifted off. He doesn't know anything's wrong. Kwame exhaled slowly. Good. We keep it that way. But before either could speak again, the private elevator chimed. Both their heads snapped toward it. Tun's voice came through the intercom. Sir, someone's here to see you. Says his name is Samuel Adeyemi. He refuses to leave. Kwame's eyes hardened. Bring him up. The elevator doors slid open 30 seconds later. A tall man stepped out, his face weathered, hair streaked with gray, but his eyes, sharp, calculating, were unmistakable. He carried himself like someone who had spent a lifetime in control of dangerous situations. Nephew, Samuel said, his voice smooth, almost amused. You've grown into quite the man. Kwame didn't move. You've been circling my home for days. Tonight you decided to stop hiding. Samuel smiled faintly. I wanted to give you the chance to do the right thing without unpleasantness. You mean hand over something I don't have, Kwame said flatly. Samuel's gaze flicked briefly to Amara. Oh, you have it. Or she does. The evidence your mother took from me. It's the only thing standing between me and what's rightfully mine. Amara's voice cut in, calm but edged. What's rightfully yours? That gold was meant for famine relief. You stole it from the starving. Samuel's expression didn't change. Survival has never been about fairness. It's about who has the power to take and keep. Kwame stepped forward, closing the distance between them. You came here thinking you could intimidate me into giving you something you lost decades ago. You've underestimated me. Samuel chuckled, low and cold. You think your money protects you? Money buys men like me, Kwame. And it buys the kind of problems you can't make disappear with lawyers. Kwame's voice dropped. You threatened my son. That ends now. The room went still. Even Samuel's smirk faltered for a fraction of a second. Then Kwame reached into his jacket pocket and tossed something onto the coffee table. The flash drive slid across the polished wood. That's what you came for. One ledger. Enough to prove you stole what wasn't yours, but not enough to take you down completely. You walk away now. You keep your freedom. You push further, and I release the rest to every international agency that will take it. Samuel's eyes narrowed. You're bluffing. Kwame didn't blink. Try me. For a long moment, Samuel stood there, weighing the man in front of him. Finally, he picked up the flash drive and slipped it into his pocket. You've inherited your mother's nerve. That will serve you until it doesn't. He turned toward the elevator. This isn't over. As the doors closed behind him, the tension in the room eased, but only slightly. Amara looked at Kwame. He'll be back. I know, Kwame said quietly. But now he knows I'm not the boy in that photograph anymore. And neither is Malik. Later that night, with Malik sleeping soundly and the penthouse secured, Kwame poured 2 glasses of water and handed one to Amara. They sat in the quiet glow of the living room, the storm outside beginning to fade. I owe you an apology, Kwame said. I doubted you. I thought you had some angle, some reason for being here that wasn't what you claimed. But you were here because you made a promise. Amara's eyes softened. It wasn't just my grandmother's promise. It became mine the moment I saw you. The boy in that photograph and the man who still needed someone to guard his blind side. Kwame looked at her, the weight of gratitude and respect in his gaze. You've done more than guard it. You reminded me that not all loyalty is bought. They sat in silence for a moment, listening to the rain ease. When morning came, the city felt fresh, the streets washed clean. Samuel had vanished, for now, but Kwame knew the battle wasn't truly over. Still, something had shifted. He had allies now, not just paid ones, but the kind who stood their ground when danger came to the door. As Malik bounded into the room, chattering about his soccer game, Kwame felt a rare sense of calm. He glanced at Amara, who met his look with a small, knowing smile. Family wasn't just blood. Sometimes it was the people who stood beside you when the storm hit hardest and refused to leave. Kwame walked over to his son, ruffling his hair. Come on, let's get ready for that game. And Amara, he looked back at her. You're coming with us. She nodded. Always. If the story touched your heart, remember, courage isn't just about facing danger. It's about protecting what matters most. Subscribe to the channel, like this video, and share it with someone who believes in loyalty, resilience, and the power of keeping a promise.